Okay, I guess it's subsection 1. We're still in section 1. And the next little ditty that we're going to look at are at plant processes. Now, we're going to talk, actually, you need to know what photosynthesis is and cellular respiration. I'm not going to review it here, but if you go back in the videos in the unit interactions and ecosystems, we go over what photosynthesis is and cellular respiration, and that's probably worth taking a peek at. Okay, but plant processes. So what we're going to look at is this. So there are 3 processes involved in moving material from the soil into the plant. Okay, there's 3 things we're going to look at. And I'm not going to look at it in amazing detail. In class, we do a lot of demos. Here, I'm just going to go through the basics. Okay, and so you might want to do a little bit of research on your own if need be. Okay, so the 3 processes are, I'm just going to show you what they are first. Something called transpiration. Okay, transpiration. We're going to look at also diffusion. And diffusion is a huge concept that you are going to see over and over and over and over and over again in your school career as well as probably in life as well. It's just a huge concept. And you can apply it to lots of things besides science. Anyways, I'm rambling. And the last thing is capillary action. Okay, so those are the 3 processes that I'm going to explain in a very concise way here. The first one is transpiration. Now, transpiration, first of all, and this diagram shows it very obviously, transpiration happens in the leaves of the plant or at the leaves of the plant. Okay, and what this is there are tiny little holes, and this shows it here, tiny little holes on the underside of the leaves, depending on the plant. There are tiny little holes in the underside of the leaves, and these holes are called one is called a stoma, and plural is stomata. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of these little holes, and what happens, transpiration, what happens here is these stomata are open. They're not always open, they can be open and shut, but when they're open, transpiration is the evaporation of water from the surface of the plant. And what we're talking about as the surface is the leaves, and in particular at the holes called the stomata. Okay, so through these little holes, yes, there's some gas exchange, but what I'm trying to show here is that what comes out here, actually I should show it in blue. What comes out of that hole is H2O, but as a vapor. Or if we wanted to do it, be really chemistry minded, we put a little G for gas, gaseous. Okay, so water vapor evaporates out of the stomata. Okay, so that's one of the processes. Now, the reason why the plant is getting rid of that water is because it needs to make room for more water to be taken into the plant. So the plant regulates how much water it loses by transpiration depending on what its need is and what the circumstances in the environment are. Okay, that's a lot of information all in one shot. But anyways, that's transpiration. Diffusion is the next one. Now, I may as well just give you the definition right off the bat here, and then I'll kind of work backwards. Okay, so diffusion is when materials, okay, and this material can actually be solids, liquids, or gases. Most of the time we talk about liquids and gases, but if given enough time, even solids will diffuse. Okay, but diffusion is when materials will move, and we're talking particles of those materials. They will move from an area of very high concentration, that means where there's a lot of it, to an area of lesser concentration. That means they're going to go from where there's lots of it to where there's not much of it. And what the particles are always trying to accomplish is something called equilibrium. That means a balance on both sides or in an area. Okay. Now, when we're talking about plants, I want you to look at this diagram here that I got from the internet, and I don't even know where anymore. But in this diagram, this dotted line, and it's kind of labeled up actually. Yeah, right there. So this side is inside the roots. and this side is outside in the soil. Okay, now this dotted line right here, that represents the membrane, actually the cell membrane. I'm just going to talk about the membrane in the roots, but it's actually per cell. This membrane is a semi-permeable membrane. That means things can get through it, but not everything can. It's semi-permeable. So some things can get through and some things can't. So if you take a look at these, these orange particles right here, those ones right there, it's a good example here. Can that particle get through that hole? No, it's too big, right? So not everything can get through the cell membrane. It has to be of a certain size. And well, you'll learn this down the road, maybe in grade 9 or whatever. Sometimes there are other mechanisms involved with moving material. But for right now, we're just going to talk about semi-permeable. So some things can get through, some things can't. We're going to focus here on water. So these little blue particles here are water particles. Now, go back to the definition. It says diffusion is when material moves from an area of high concentration to an area of lesser concentration. So which side of that membrane is there a higher concentration of water? That's right, in the soil, right? There's lots more water particles, those little blue ones, in the soil than there is in the roots. Okay, so what particles will naturally do, and I'm not going to go into the specifics right now, what the molecules will do is they will move from one side to the other. Okay, now this little arrow just shows that when we're talking about molecular levels, right, it's not ever perfect. It's not ever one-sided. So yeah, particles are going to, maybe in this situation, it was in this little area right here, it was higher in concentration over here, so it moved over, okay? So this isn't what we're really looking at. We're looking at this right here right now, okay? So that's basically diffusion. If we're talking specifically about the diffusion of water, it's called osmosis. Osmosis is still diffusion. It's just specifically the diffusion of water, okay? And that's a good word to remember. Now, this is kind of a gross description, but another example of diffusion is when somebody farts in the room, right? Where they farted, that smell is intense, right? It's very strong. That's because it's in very high concentration. But that fart smell does not stay in that spot. It moves, and it's actually moving to an area where it's in lesser concentration. Okay? And as it does it, it spreads out. So actually the smell and stench of that fart becomes less and less as it gets spread thinner and thinner. But that's because it's diffusing, right? And eventually it moves until it reaches some sort of equilibrium. Okay, last one, capillary action. Capillary action is the attraction of water particles to other water particles and surfaces. But mostly we're going to talk about water particles. So in this diagram here, oops, get rid of this. In this diagram here, each of these little happy faces or sad faces, whichever, is a little water particle. Okay. But water loves to hold on to itself, and it actually likes to hold on to other things as well, but it's very attracted to other water particles. Okay. So if you try to pull up some water particles, you try to pull this up, it actually is going to pull other water particles along with it because it's connected. Okay. And this is how material moves up the stem of a plant. Okay. First of all, these water particles will move by diffusion, right? And as that continues to move on, it's going to pull other particles along with it. It's not just going to go by itself. It's going to pull other particles along with it. And that essentially is what capillary action is. That's how you can get water and whatever's dissolved in the water to go against gravity and go up the stem of a plant. Okay, so it says it right here. When some particles move by diffusion to another part of the plant, other particles are pulled along with them because of that attraction. And that's how things move up. So capillary action mainly happens in the stem, although it happens everywhere in the plant. Diffusion, mainly we're looking at the roots. although it happens in many, many areas in the plant, primarily the roots. And this one, you know where this happens. This happens in the leaves, or you could be so specific as to say it happens in stomata. Okay, that is it.